Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guest with your host, Christina Nitchman.
This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week, Savvy runs weekly broadcasts providing entrepreneurs and successful individuals a platform to express their dreams, hopes, lessons learned, expertise, and wisdom with the world. Our guest today is Paul Parkinson. He is the author of the new book, Unselfish, Love Thy Neighbor as Thy Selfie. Through Paul's journey in creating this book, he has brought together a collection of 99 stories of full-colored photos of selfless people celebrating acts of kindness and extraordinary sacrifices of regular people and celebrities. This book was created with the hope that people would turn their cameras around and look for someone they can help. Today only, August 3rd, we're gifting 5 copies of Paul's new book, Unselfish. To get your free copy, email savvycentralradio@gmail.com and type Unselfish Stories in the subject line for your free copy of Unselfish. To find out more about Paul and his book at unselfishstories.com. Hi, Paul. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
Great. Thanks, Christina.
I'm very happy to have you out here today. You have a fascinating book you've written. It's called Unselfish, Love Thy Neighbor as Thy Selfie. And you have a very interesting story about how you came to writing it, I'm sure. Share with our audience a little bit about your background and what brought you to writing your book.
Sure. Thank you. About 3 years ago, I'd been involved in medical sales for roughly 16 years, and I left the industry to become involved in the entertainment industry. I wanted to provide positive media alternatives. I had just finished a feature film, Nowhere Safe, and was looking for the next project, a celebrity releasing a book called Selfish, and I just immediately thought, there needs to be a counterbalance in a book called Unselfish. So that's kind of where the inspiration came from.
And it's interesting because I know most people in general are probably would consider themselves selfish. But in this day and age, it seems like we've become obsessed as a society with selfies on Facebook and really not paying much attention to people outside of our circle. Why do you think this has become so epidemic?
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Most probably don't consider themselves selfish. I mean, a certain amount of focus on ourselves needs to be done. We need to keep ourselves healthy. But I think the focus on self has greatly expanded, particularly with the rise of the internet and social media. USA Today says that there's over 1 million selfies taken every day.
Wow.
And I'm not advocating completely eliminating the selfie, but it just seems like we all spend a little too much time promoting ourselves, and the focus often is not on others. So what I'm hoping for is that people would, I call it, turn the camera around, take some time to see those around them, and most importantly, just act to do something.
Mm-hmm. And this is interesting, Paul, because I had a conversation this weekend with a good friend of mine who said what's interesting about the whole social media phenomena, whether you're on it for business or pleasure or personal, is that often the people who portray themselves online in a certain way, whether it be on Facebook or whatever, they often aren't the real people you meet in life. It's like you can become this alternate personality on these social media sites.
Yeah, many times it's not reality. It's not things as they really are. And I think that it's certainly easy to do that, to have an anonymous life. It's just not reality sometimes. And I think what you've said is very accurate.
Yeah, and I think also what I tend to notice is that the people who seem to kind of promote themselves or take the most selfies, I don't think necessarily it's that they have the most confidence in themselves or think, hey, I'm amazing. It's actually often quite the opposite. So what do you hope that people will gain through reading your book and taking it into their life?
Yeah, I hope that people will, first of all, recognize there is so much good in the world. A lot of times we don't see it. Sometimes it's not portrayed in the media, but there's just so many good people in the world, and all of us can do something. We can't do everything, certainly. There are stories in Unselfish. There's one example of a Hollywood executive who left a 7-figure job and moved to Cambodia and is saving children there. We can't all do that, but we can all do something, and I would hope that people would walk away and be inspired and say, I can do a little more. I can do a little more to be kinder to others. I can help make life less difficult for others.
Mm-hmm. Like you just mentioned, it doesn't have to be uprooting your whole life and going to Africa. It's interesting. I had a good friend for years who worked with me in corporate, and she kept saying to me, one day I'm going to go off and be a missionary in South Africa or something like that and help people who are starving. And I used to think, well, what are you waiting for? There's people here you could help. You don't need to wait till you retire to then go to Africa or South Africa and do change. You can do it in your everyday life.
Yeah.
What are some examples in your book of maybe everyday people taking action?
Yeah. Well, first, this is a little maybe just a little bit more extreme, but you use the words you don't have to wait until you retire. Oddly enough, there's a story in Unselfish that talks about a pilot who told his co-captain or the person in the cockpit with him, he said, when I retire, I'm going to do this and this, just like you just said. And the person flying with him said, you don't have to wait until you retire. And so surely enough, he took the opportunity and he started, it's called Farm Rescue. His name's Bill Gross. He started a nonprofit where farmers help to take care of each other's fields and they take care of each other's farms when there's a need or a tragedy in the family. Again, that's a little more perhaps of a large scale. One story I really like is a young boy in the book named Ethan who he told his mother, he said, I don't want any gifts for my birthday. I already have too many toys, he said. And he told her, he said, I'd like to just donate whatever you would give to me. I'd like to be able to get bicycles for foster children. And again, very small example, but it's just a young boy who saw a need around him right in his own community and helped to fill that need.
I love that. That is so cool, Paul. And this recalls for me, I met the founders of a company called Pilots and Paws, and they love animals and they're pilots. And they thought, well, you know what? I know what we could do. Pilots love to fly anyway, right? So why don't we just get all the community of pilots around the nation together, and if we need a dog shipped from one place to another, get the community together, get us on one forum where we can ask pilots who are already in those states, hey, can you ship this dog to the next state and hand it off to the next pilot so that we can get him to, say, the East Coast to get adopted?
That's great. Yeah, and everybody has different talents. There's another lady, Karen from Southern Oregon, who she liked to bake, and so she decided one year to bake a pie a day, 366 days. It was a leap year. She baked one pie every day for that entire year, gave them to former teachers or children's teachers, to firemen, policemen, even the elderly gentleman who hit her with his car. I mean, she just gave out a pie every day of the year to those in her community. Now, many of us would say, well, I don't bake, I can't do that. Yeah. That's okay. We take the talents we have and we use them to serve others, and that's what she did.
And I like that you mentioned that. Along the lines of that story you mentioned about the boy saying, I have way than enough toys, Mom. You don't need to get me toys. Give it to someone else. I have someone I met who decided 20-odd years ago, her husband and her would, oh, it's Christmas. What are we going to get each other? And, sometimes for your spouse or your boyfriend or your loved ones, you go nuts trying to find these outrageous gifts sometimes because you want to make them happy and you want to get them something they don't have. And you spend hundreds of dollars. And they had the same idea as this little boy, and they said, you know what, instead, from now on, instead of buying each other gifts, we'll just buy the gifts we would have bought each other, but give them to kids of families in need that can't buy them, gifts. And now it's become, over 20 years have gone by, and now they've serving 300 families, City Santa in New York City. And I thought, what a cool idea. And you think, just like you said, it doesn't have to be outrageous. They started really small, just getting the couple of gifts they would get each other and give to kids in need. And now it's turned into over 300 families being served by their initial idea. So, I mean, it's just a fabulous idea that whatever talent you have, you can just explode it in a way that start small, start where you are. And it's like a ripple in a pond.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love that story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really good. What has it done to change you in your life? Have you had any difference in the way you proceed in the world? Have you done things that you wouldn't have done before you started writing this book?
We really have. As a family, I have 6 children. We've always tried to serve in our community in many different ways. My family was very involved with the searching for the stories, and we'd go through them together. Now we'll read stories from Unselfish each night. But it's really caused us just to step back and evaluate each time we make decisions or we make purchases. It's helped us to realize once again there are just so many good people doing so many things, and I truly believe we can all do a little more than we're doing, and it's motivated us in that regard, and it's just caused us to view the world differently. Quite honestly, it's been very life-changing to to read all these inspirational stories.
Yeah. And to realize that you can also be that inspiration. You don't have to. I find it interesting when I talk to some people who've created what some people see as really amazing work in the world. And one person I talked to a couple of years ago said, but really what I do in the world and what someone else does is really not any different what anyone else can do. I mean, maybe the scale might be different, like the guy who went to Cambodia that you mentioned before, but we in our own way can all make significant changes in the world.
That's a great point to make. All of us within our own sphere of influence, no one's role is more important than the others. Perhaps one role is more visible, but given the resources we each have, no one's part they play in their sphere of influence is more important than anyone else's. I truly believe that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things to do is really, when I get small business owners out here who, want to get their message out to the world, it's my greatest pleasure to be able to help them get that message out in an interview with them. And it's my gift and it's my pleasure. And it gives me, I think that's the one thing that people don't realize is that giving, you actually receive.
Right.
It's a gift. Yeah,
the more you give, the more you receive, I think it's been said.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that almost makes it selfish to give, doesn't it?
Yeah. In fact, that reminds me, Paul, there was a Friends episode. I don't know how many of the listeners listen to Friends, but many years ago, there was an actual episode where this guy was doing a pledge-a-thon. I think it was Joey character. And he said, there's no way you can unselfishly give because you get so much good feeling out of it. It's selfish.
Right. Yep. Very true.
So tell me, what of all the stories you've read or experienced, because I'm sure a lot of them didn't even make it into the book, have been your greatest inspiration, have inspired you most? What are some or one story that's really been just your main focus? I really like, wow, that just really inspired me.
Yeah, boy, it's so hard. There's one story, and this may be because I have teenage children and I spend time with young people. There's a story about a young girl named Shy Johnson. She was a sophomore in high school. She has special needs. She was being bullied. She didn't want to go to school anymore. She came home and her mother was distraught. Her mom, in a last-ditch effort, contacted the captain of the football team, certainly a young man who had tremendous social capital, and this young man responded as we hope all young men would respond, and he gathered his friends around. He took this girl into his group. She began to eat lunch with them at the so-called popular kids table, right? He walked her to class, literally changed her life. She just graduated from high school a few weeks ago. I've spoken with her mother, and her life was changed completely. I think any young person can be involved in things like that. There's so much bullying that takes place. There's so much exclusion. Certainly social media, again, has expanded that. I just read yesterday a story about a young man who set up an Instagram account at his high school, and he would post pictures of people in the high school and say nice things about them. It was done anonymously. No one knew who was doing it. And he was the co-valedictorian at his high school graduation. And during his speech, he revealed himself that I'm the one that's been doing this. And it was so powerful. But again, it was done anonymously in a positive way. I think young people have so much good they can do. Everyone does, but especially the young people who are so vulnerable. And so that story resonated with me. I thought it was a great example of young men who showed leadership. One interesting thing about the story, this boy, his name is Carson Jones, he never told his parents what he'd been doing. They found out about it later when he was being honored by the legislature for what he had done for this young woman. So he was not in it for the notoriety. He didn't post it on Facebook. He didn't talk about what he was doing. He just did it and didn't even bother telling his parents what he was doing, right?
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that kids as well as adults can make a major significant changes, and often they are in the world. They're doing amazing things. And also thinking back to when I was in high school, my parents were getting divorced. It was really tough. And there was this wonderful family, my girlfriend I met, who told her parents, hey, this girl's going through a lot. Let's invite her and her sister over for Sunday meals. And for a number of years, every Sunday, we had a family sit-down meal, which we never usually had at my house growing up. And it really showed me the value of family and what it could really be like to have a family that values each other, sits down, listens to each other, even the kids. So that was a wonderful gift. And I think something as simple as that, it can really transform a young person's life.
Yeah, it's something you remember. And they had to step out of their comfort zone. All these situations, we all have to take a step out of our comfort zone. And as we do so, we recognize we feel so good as we make a positive difference in someone's life. And so it's not about getting more followers, more people to like us on social media. It's a lot of these things are done in private. In fact, most of the people in Unselfish, they didn't want their stories told. They were hesitant because that wasn't their motive. Their motive was not to receive attention and publicity. Their motive was just to do good.
Absolutely. And so I'm assuming, are you planning to do future stories and a sequel to this book?
Yeah, volume 2 is actually already in the works. There are thousands of stories were collected, and we narrowed them down for this first edition. There's 99 stories, but there were so many additional stories that came in that continue to come in, and hopefully it will become an annual volume of inspirational stories.
Oh, wow. So that leads me to ask, can anyone out there with a fabulous story that they might want to share to inspire the world, can they join in?
Yes, by all means, please. We have our website is unselfishstories.com. There's a place there to submit stories as well as a photo if you'd like. Would love to have all the stories we can to share through our social media networks and also to consider for future volumes. So that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Also, if anyone wants to get your book today, is your website a good place to get it, or should they go to Amazon? Where's the best place to get it?
Yeah, Amazon, it's available there, barnesandnoble.com. It's becoming available in the coming weeks in Barnes & Noble stores throughout the country, but online, certainly Amazon's probably one of the easiest places to go, and then different book and fine gift shops across the country.
Wait, that's awesome. So through this journey that you've come to creating this book and the future ones to come, what would you say has been the number one lesson you've learned through all of this?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is there are so many good people in the world.
Yeah.
And that we need to focus on that positive, and that all of us can do something. We can all be good people, right? We can all do our part to make the world a better place. I know that sounds cliche, but I like to use the word to make life less difficult for each other.
I really like that you say that, Paul, because I think sometimes we feel that we have to struggle. And I've been in the corporate world for 20 years, and I used to hear people at the water cooler before we get started with the day going, life is horrible, life sucks, it doesn't get any better. And, you can sit there and complain, or we can all as a community help to make life better. It doesn't have to be as much of a struggle if we all work together to make the community better.
It's so true, and it's not a zero-sum game. It's not one win, one loses. There's, if I might just share briefly, one story from Unselfish is about an auto shop owner in Georgia who, in a hurricane, lost his auto shop. There was a competitor of his, literally a block away, who was unaffected. This company, Teeter & Company, they went to this man who had lost his auto shop, who couldn't pay his employees, and they said, you know what, we have space here. We're going to give you space. We're going to give you a phone line. You can take care of your customers here in our shop. We're your competitor until you can get your place built again. How often do you see that happen? Again, the world is so competitive. If I win, if one win, one loses. Here was two people working together, competitors, to win, and both benefited.
Yeah. And that always says to me, Paul, that mindset is that we have a fixed pie. I always see it like an actual piece of pie. And people tend to think that there's a pie, you take a piece out of it, and then there's less for someone else. And really, I see the way God created this universe is that it isn't a fixed pie. That the more you give, the more that is more abundance. More abundance comes out of the giving. And in essence, when you start thinking in lack or hoarding or thinking I have to take from another, that is when there's not enough. But the way the universe has been constructed, there's more than enough, especially when we share and think in community.
Absolutely. There's more than enough good to go around.
I love that message. So where do you see going from here? Now you're writing future books like this, future volumes and such. Are you going to write other types of books going forward?
Film has been an area where we have interest. As I mentioned, a feature film was produced with one of my companies last year. There's a couple of films currently in development that'll go along with this theme. They're a little early to announce, but that's part of it. And then again, future volumes, perhaps specialty volumes as well. And so there's so much that can be done with this positive message.
Yeah, I would actually like to see, it would be awesome if a lot of these stories could be worked out into a documentary or even just a film to reenact them. Because nothing more than I think sometimes the visual content, because it's one thing to read it, but it's another thing when you experience it. And I think the visually on a film actually helps you experience these stories a little deeper.
Yeah, very powerful to see things visually. You're right.
Yeah. So I find what I'm finding from hearing your stories here that your book really highlights community, love, unselfish acts, and really truly giving from the heart, not just getting to give or getting to receive, that is. Do you really feel that these messages can really transform the world for the better? And if so, how?
I really do. I've had many people call and say, we read a few stories each night as a family, and it's caused us to do this or to do that. I think what happens as you read, and the stories are so varied. They're from all around the world. They're from different walks of life, rich, poor, young, old, you name it. There's a whole broad background of people in Unselfish. Mm-hmm. But as people read these stories, they can connect with a few of them and say, I can do that. That sounds like something I can do. And I just think as we read positive things, something inside of us it connects, and we have that light, and it says, I can do more. So I believe, yes, that it can make a difference, certainly.
Yeah, and what I like here that I'm hearing is that a lot of them are ordinary people. They're not doing something that requires millions of dollars sometimes. And I think that's the key here, because we'll hear some stories on TV where someone accomplished something amazing and transformed a village in a third world country, and they had major resources behind them. And you think, hey, I'm a 9-to-5er, I go to my job, or I own a small business. There's no way I have those type of resources to make any type of real change in the world. But what's cool about a lot of your stories in your book is a lot of them are ordinary people, and small changes do, like we said in the beginning of the interview, are like a ripple in the pond. They do make an effect. And as other people see you do great things in the world, no matter how small they might seem, it will inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, that's really important for all of us to realize that it doesn't require the big things to make a difference. Many times it's just the small and simple things that bring about great things, right? And so I think it's very important as we read stories of others that we don't compare ourselves, that we don't try and make what they do our own application. These are merely illustrations of what something else has done. Our own applications will be different than theirs. The principle is service, but the applications themselves will be very different based on our circumstances, our time, our ability to give.
Yeah. And to remember that no gift is less than another, because there was a friend of mine who was asked to help out and do murals. And she's like, but what is artwork? It's not a big deal. Anyone can do drawings. And I'm like, I can't. And it's a gift that you can give to the community. If you can go out there and do murals, it is an act that is an act of service. And it doesn't have to be super huge, quote unquote, or what a lot in the community might seem is really awesome, big, explosive service. Like we just said, small ripples in the pond, every bit makes a big change in the world.
One of the stories in Unselfish is about a boy whose mother had passed away, and he went to an all-Catholic high school in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. They were having a mother-daughter breakfast, and of course he didn't have a mother to take him, so one of his friends' moms invited him to go along with them. They had their picture taken, and afterwards they went and bought a bouquet of flowers, went by the cemetery and gave flowers to his mother. He always remembers this. He now calls her every year on Mother's Day. Again, she was already going to the breakfast. All she did is just said, perhaps I can take someone who can't go. So many times the service that we give is just part of our normal everyday course. We're just trying to add people. Just as the example you gave, the family was going to be having dinner anyway when you were young, but they invited you to come along. And so many times it's just a matter of expanding our circle and saying, hey, who else could I invite to participate in this experience with me or with my family? Yeah.
And that recalls for me, Paul, when I was growing up also, I had another mentor. It was a guy dancer, a man who would have been the same age as my dad. And he always gave me advice and took me under his wing as like counsel. And so I used to later on in my 20s come and visit him for Father's Day, send Father's Day card, because in essence, he was my surrogate dad. Giving advice to a youngster is, even that is awesome. And it really helped. It helped me.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Paul. It's been so wonderful having you out here today, sharing your wonderful stories. And everyone, please go out there and get unselfish. Love thy neighbor as thyselfie. And before we head on out, Paul, is there any last words you'd like to leave with our audience?
I appreciate the time you've given to this today. And I would just encourage people, as I've said earlier, to turn the camera around, to, I guess, go against the grain, and to try and find ways to be a positive influence in someone else's life. They don't have to leave the country. They can do it right in their own neighborhoods, right in their own communities. But just try and find something small in addition to what you may already be doing, and help try to make life less difficult for other people.
Awesome. And tell everyone again where they can find out more about you and your book.
Yeah, our website is unselfishstories.com. We also have a Facebook page where we post stories almost daily. That's Unselfish Stories. And love to have additional stories come in through our website.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited you were able to come out here and share this. Thank you so much, Paul, for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks for your time.
Savvy Central Radio is home to over 100,000 listeners per month globally and runs in syndication on 8 AM and FM platforms, including iHeartRadio and 6 podcasting platforms. To find out more about our paid sponsorship opportunities or to become a guest and find out how we can help you get your message out to the world, call 718 area code 713-2289 or email at savvycentralradio@gmail.com.